You're looking good, and it feels good to be with you today. Hello, I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, author of this book, Consider My Servant Job, and this is News with the Eyes of Faith, where I talk about news from the perspective of Christ and the doctrine of Christ. So, as always, our news item is Joe Biden is still president. We saw him at the debate, and someone's issuing a bunch of pardons. Now, that's sort of common with presidents, but who's really making decisions in the presidency right now? When's the last time you saw Vice President Harris? And do you find that a bit disturbing when you don't know where the leadership is or who's running the country? Well, speaking of elections, Utah auditor, Deseret News reports, Utah auditor finds 1,400 deceased voters on rolls and problems with post-election safeguards. This is from the Deseret News. Vice Governor Deidre Henderson, what's up? Judge Griffith, you did that report called Lost Not Stolen. I read it. Do you need to update it, get some clarification, do a reboot? Because we were told there was no voter fraud going on, and then 1,400 deceased voters on a roll. Could that tip an election? Well, definitely in a very close race. And that's Deseret News. That's not Alex Jones. Daniel Penny, USMC, found not guilty. There's this interesting era, the DEI era, the era of George Floyd to Daniel Penny, 2020 to 2024, 4 years of insanity. This assumption, this narrative that the left poses that all whites are racist, every white's racist, including Abraham Lincoln. DEI, DIED, DEI died, is essentially kind of a well-meaning idea. You want to help people out. You never want to hold anyone back. But it's essentially a flawed idea because it replaced racism with institutional racism with institutional retaliation. Remember, never let a good crisis to wait for those of us who are a little bit older? Oh. So it didn't work. Reality spoke up, and we all suffered because we were not aligned with reality. You get a copy of the book called 10 Natural Laws of Time and Life Management by Hiram Smith, where he talks about the belief window in there. And if you have wrong ideas in your belief window, what happens? It's always this contest between how do you feel versus what is real. People want to feel a certain way, or people just want to embrace reality. Also from the Deseret Snooze, women continue to outpace men in Utah college enrollment. Beehive State consistent with ongoing national trend of more females in higher ed than males. Isn't that discrimination? This is what I call social confusocracy. I use this term confusocracy to describe how the government's being run. Who's really running the country? You think Biden or Harris is running it? And that's part of the confusocracy, the decoying, diversion, getting us all confused about things. So the 1950 model of the Caucasian Nuclear Family dominating America, that does not work anymore. That is not an accurate model of how reality functions. We act like men rule everything, but clearly women dominate. You see these movies, what they'll do is they'll take a legacy white male character and then smuggle in a DEI female character that happened with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Indiana Jones, and the Dial of Destiny. Yeah, that's what's going on. It's the social confusocracy. Think about this. In your circles, your wards, your stakes, your neighborhoods at work, you have a married couple and have a situation where the wife is better educated than the husband. Have you noticed that? Pay attention to that trend. See if you see that going on. I know that in two cases. Some of them are equal. It's a husband and wife are both lawyers. But yeah, I know for a fact two people, and that's the trend that's going to be continuing. Now, you think about this having more educated women than men affects career opportunities. The Family Proclamation, preside, provide, and protect. And how can you provide if you're not educated? If that, it's the displacement factor. You have a limited number of slots in higher education, and women are displacing men from the opportunity. Now, now there's workarounds. That's the brick and mortar universities, online universities provide a workaround, and that just may be the salvation for men is to go that route instead of the traditional brick and mortar approach. But getting back to my original point is having more educated women than men, that affects men's opportunity for service, their job job opportunities, and also their church service. Local units, if men are having undereducated, so we're having to work two jobs, can we serve as elders quorum presidents, bishops, or stake presidents? What about mission and temple presidents? Is this displacing some talented men from becoming general authorities? Pay attention to the system it creates, the incentives and the system that it creates. Think about an economist. If we're having more women and men, what are the secondary and tertiary consequences, long-term consequences that affect men, not just women? What's the human cost? Now I'm educated. I have a Bachelor of Arts, Brigham Young University, December 1995, 3.54 GPA. Bachelor of Arts in History, minor political science. So I try and hit on, and I'm not married, so I try and hit on a woman with a master's degree or a PhD. How does that work? She's clearly going to be making more money than me, better educated. Does that cause problems? Or I just told to shut up and make the best of it? Thomas Sowell wrote a book called Thinking Beyond Stage One. Think about that. Along the lines of higher education, the new president of Harvard, the one who's not a neo-Nazi, talked about that they need to rethink their messaging. So is your message at Harvard, men are not worthy of higher education, or men today need to be punished for situations in the past where women weren't educated? Now, it's interesting because at Brigham Young University from day one was always co-educational, men and women. Brigham Young always advocated women being educated, and that's influenced things. But have we now overcorrected a problem? A fun book, put this on your New Year's resolution list. It's by William F. Buckley, called God and Man at Yale. I read it a couple of years ago, and I wish I'd read it before I went to BYU. Another book I wish I read was the BYU School of Destiny, the one-volume version of BYU history. I wish I'd read that beforehand. It's helpful to get, sorry, a little technical issue, to get a feel of what the university was like. Also, I'd read Discourses of Brigham Young. You may want to read the Brigham Young manual, but before you go to one of the BYUs, get up to speed on Brigham Young and the history of the universities, but also God and Man at Yale, the obligation that alumni have to the university. And if the university is getting out of control, and if they're admitting more men than women, so you lose the parity, do we as an alumni need to speak up, realizing that the board of directors are prophets, seers, and revelators, but letting our voice be heard and then letting it go from there. Yesterday or today, Sony released a MCU film. This is Sony MCU, not Disney MCU. Their film Kraven, a secondary character. Having played Marvel superheroes as a teenager, I knew who Kraven was, and he's sort of their great hunter, sort of a big game hunter. I think they remade this as a type of a Tarzan one. So, a disclaimer. I own stock in Disney, and I own stock in Sony. So I'm doing this commenting as just normal human First Amendment right, but also as a shareholder in these two companies. I'm loyal to the brand. I like the idea. The MCU was going really great, and it just, once they finished the Infinity War saga, poof. What happened was just franchise fatigue, oversaturation. You remember how everything was just a vampire movie a couple years ago? They had the Harry Potter knockoffs, the teen adventure stories. We had the same thing here. There's an oversaturation. You can always revitalize a franchise or a genre, getting a good storytelling. It's interesting how we're just getting oversaturated with fantasy novels now. Thank you, Brandon Sanderson, just publishing these every year, publishing a telephone book. So franchise fatigue, oversaturation, all the streaming spinoffs. Reclaiming the properties. How do you do with the Netflix version of Daredevil versus the MCU? And I didn't watch any of these things. You just have to draw the line somewhere. Didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just the movies was good enough for me. I'm sure there's a lot of low quality. She-Hulk. It's interesting too, is now with Kraven, it was rated R, and they're going the rated R route, following Deadpool and Wolverine. And this is really a road to nowhere. I do not go to R-rated movies. And so I'm voting with my pocketbook in addition to being a shareholder. So, yeah, it's an interesting movie. I was reading some pre-publication stuff, and they're always just reducing their estimates. Apparently, it was that bad, worse than Madam Web. The problem with it is all those things I listed, the oversaturation, but just Disney flat out has been mismanaging their acquired properties. So they have their core properties, the Disney legacy stuff, the stuff you grew up as a kid during Walt's lifetime, and then 70s and 80s revitalized with, what's his name? I can't remember his name, Eisenberg or whatever his name is. Sorry, I'm just ad-libbing right now. They acquired Pixar, they acquired Star Wars, and they acquired Marvel. And man, they've just that stuff and destroyed it. You ever think you'd ever see a bad Star Wars movie? It's happened. Sign of the times. I watched a video from the Critical Drinker, and he said that Star Wars Acolyte has launched the careers of many film critics. I put a link to it. Anyways, criticizing it. That's true. How this News with the Eye of Faith started, I was doing my other podcast with Come Follow Me, and I just started throwing these news items in. I thought, wait a minute, this is kind of taking away from what I'm doing. So okay, let me just do a separate podcast with that. And so, yeah, thank you, Critical Drinker. BYU and AJ Dybantsa, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Good player at BYU, so you are 100% welcome here. Syria situation. Pay attention to biblical prophecies about the last days. In the topical guide, you have last days, the guide to the scriptures, latter days. When I was a little kid, I read Zechariah 12:3, which talks about how all nations will be at war with Israel. And I kind of believe that because, well, wait a minute, that's going to be the United States. The United States going to go to war with Israel? Well, son of a gun. United States, Soviet Union, NATO and the Warsaw Pact getting together to invade this country the size of New Jersey. Well, not exactly that, but so again, yeah, that's what's going on. Another news item, the Premier of Quebec. Catholic news agency reports Quebec Premier Francois Legault said last week that praying in public parks and streets is not something we want in Quebec. The Premier said he wished to send a very clear message to the Islamists who suggested were a danger to the values that are fundamental to Quebec. Yeah, snails are not kosher, from what I understand, but that is Judaism. So, no praying in public from Quebec. Huh. Yeah, in America we have that First Amendment thing, just that great firewall. This is what Joseph Smith said. This is from the Joseph Smith Manual, chapter 29. The saints can testify whether I am willing to lay down my life for my brethren, if it has been demonstrated that I have been willing to die for a quote-unquote Mormon, and the M word there. I'm bold to declare that before heaven I am just as ready to die in defending the rights of Presbyterian, a Baptist, or a good man of any other denomination for the same principle. In any other denomination, for the same principle which would trample upon the rights of the Latter-day Saints would trample upon the rights of the Roman Catholics or any other denomination who may be unpopular or too weak to defend themselves. Yeah, this doesn't just stop with Muslims. It's war on religion, the militant atheists out of the United Kingdom. Luigi Mangioli, if I pronounce it. Okay, just call him Luigi. No Mario here. The alleged shooter of the healthcare CEO, and it's interesting that let's see where I put this in the notes. Yeah, okay, got it down there. Just double checking my notes here off my tablet. So he got radicalized by higher education is what my take is. You have Hillary Clinton. She was very conservative, and boom, turned the other direction. You have Glenn Beck's daughter. He talks about how his daughter came back, and he's just troubled by it. His daughter's just kind of roboticized and just can't deprogram her. You have the racist Ivy League presidents, I should say racist, the purported anti-Semitic ones. Of course, our good friend, the Unabomber. And, this Harvard, what's your messaging type thing. There's an article from Jewish World Review, which I recommend reading. Article David Harasani talks about left-wing violence. So take a look at it. I put a link below. This is from President Joseph F. Smith. There is a deplorable tendency among people of this nation to sympathize with murderers. Because, there's people are really supportive of this murder. assassination attempt on Trump, the successful assassination of the CEO. There's a deplorable tendency among the people of this nation to sympathize with murderers, bank defaulters, evil adventurers, and 100 other classes of criminals who are at large, have been arrested or convicted for breaking the law. Such a tendency is not alone manifest among the people of various states and territories of our nation. It is also apparent among Latter-day Saints. The sympathy for criminals is entirely abnormal and has a tendency to lower and destroy the moral sentiment for any people who indulge in it. For a Latter-day Saint to sympathize either with a crime or with criminals is a burning shame, and it is high time that teachers of the community should stem such a tendency and inculcate a sentiment that make it extremely abhorrent to commit crime. See, the real issue is you have high premiums and denials because of Obamacare. Obamacare overloaded the system. So the CEO just may have been acting in the best interest of the country to do these high rates of denials because it's collapsing the system. Allegory of the Olive Tree. When you start grafting in too many branches, it kills the tree. Jacob 5, verse 37. And that's what we did with Obamacare. We just overloaded the system and collapsed it. Now, President Obama doesn't have any issue with it. Nancy Pelosi is aging out, and they don't feel the effects of Obamacare. But 30 generations from now, or 30 years from now, what's it going to be like, unless someone steps in? So really pray for DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, to do something about that. You can always be revealed and tweak. You can burn it down and start from square one again. So that's the news items. We're at 16 minutes. Got through a little bit quickly. It's Christmas time, so things get a little bit calm. And it's the stories about charitables and soup kitchens, which are absolutely wonderful. Thanksgiving, the Elks Lodge and our Boy Scout troop did a good job of feeding the poor without government intervention. So let's hit point. This is XII 12. This model I've been talking about over these past few podcasts: feelings, fairness, and friends. And that's the way which people on the left process reality, or that's their values, what they feel is important. They process things in terms of feeling, fairness, and friends. So I'm going to talk about something I call the dead ventriloquist. So this is a real life incident, and this is my point of view of the situation and how I remember it. So this isn't the ontological existence. So we're at a priesthood quorum meeting, and teacher was a general authority, quoted C.S. Lewis, and we broke apart into a buzz group. And I just made the comment is that I have an issue with quoting C.S. Lewis. We'll use his words when he talks about godhood and being gods, but what we mean by those words and what he meant by those words are not the same thing. And I just said, if you look at his teachings, he is very straightforward Anglican, straight up with the Anglican Godhead, which he I should say the Trinity, which you can read about in Mere Christianity, has a section about the Trinity. And what he believed about God and nature of gods and human potential is not what we believe. And it's the same thing with Eastern Orthodox, with theosis. We're not talking about the same thing, even though we're using the same words and quoting the same scriptures. And we had another person there, and he agreed with me. And he said, as best as I can recollect, if C.S. Lewis were alive today, he'd be angry with how we misuse his statements. Now, you notice the frame is that his frame was another person. This is social validation, social pressure, other directed, and that's the friend component of the model. Angry feelings, that's a feeling component, and they have what I call the dead ventriloquist, is where you put words in other people's mouth. And you'll hear this sometimes. If such and such were alive today, he'd feel such and such. That's a dead ventriloquist. So I'm not using the term speaking for the dead, that Orson Scott Card's game. But is this a valid way to do things? First of all, has C.S. Lewis changed his mind? Has he accepted the gospel? And would he renounce his teachings now that he's converted? Neil A. Maxwell sent him a copy of the Book of Mormon. It's in Neil A. Maxwell's biography. But beginning of that, and C.S. Lewis in his book, The Great Divorce, mentioned Salt Lake City. And so he was an educated person, so he knew about the church and he had some contact, but what his status was before, during, and after death, I don't know. So what I was talking about is from the writings we have right now, and I was appealing to a fact. I can say, okay, you read what he had to say, and this is not what he meant with these words. But my friend said he just imagine, well, he'd be very angry. And so you don't do things to make someone angry because they feel a certain way. But any what a dead person would say or what they'd think, if Joseph Ronald Reagan was here, what he'd say such and such. Well, no, that's a supposition on your part. There's no way to empirically verify that. And that's the danger, is you can just put words in anyone's mouth when you'd use the dead ventriloquist tact. So pay attention next time you hear someone says, well, this person who's dead, or this person, if he were here, he'd do things this way. You can sort of, and if it stops there, that's not good enough. You have to say, okay, from his writings or his speeches, he did things this way. For example, with George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, we could create sort of a AI chatbot version of them from their writings to know how they do things. But some things we just have no idea how they do, what or how they do things. A dead ventriloquist. So you're putting your words in someone else's mouth to give it a false sense of legitimacy. So it makes it appear that your ideas are really his ideas or her ideas. So we're at 21 minutes. Let's do the life hack. And this is called head talk. Think about this statement. It feels like you've had a conversation with me in your head that we haven't had in real life. You ever up to someone and just want to say to them, you've had a conversation with me in your head that we have not had in real life? It's a head talk. People imagine things, and it's a manipulation tactic. So if someone starts talking with you and it's like they've jumped in the middle of a conversation, it's a presumptive conversation, a manipulated tactic, where you jump in the middle, so you assume that you have certain points of agreement that you don't have. That you have the same point of view that they don't have. So to them, it feels like you've had this conversation, you come to a certain agreement about certain things, and so they're asking you, well, you need to do something. It's like, well, I never agreed to it. Well, yeah, I had this imaginary conversation that we did, and so you need to do it. And so what the solution is, I'd say, well, thank you for bringing this up. I feel like you've thought about this more than I have. Can we back up? You have this concern, and why is that important for you and for me to understand? And also suggest, would you be willing to hit the pause button? And yeah, I had people use it on me, and you have to pay attention. That's what sometimes it catches you off guard. But once you notice a person does things that way, just have that red flag tick up in your head. Like, yeah, this person talks presumptively, that they'll think that you've agreed on certain things. Just say, can you back up a minute and hit the pause button? Another technique, here's another freebie, is talking to the person talking to you in the second person. I remember talking with a person, I said, I don't want to do something, and the person responded, yes, you do. That's a manipulation technique. In fact, that's a technique that hypnotists use. When they're getting into the hypnotic state, they'll talk to you in the second person and lead you along, and that's part of makes you open up to suggestion. So when a person starts talking to you in the second person, just say, I'm sorry, you're talking in the second person, so I feel like you're imposing things on me, so let's hit the pause button. And that's not original with me. That's Stephen R. Covey's in 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, talks about hitting the pause button. So let's hit the pause button, then start talking a little bit more before I agree to anything, or you think I've agreed to anything. We're at 23 minutes, and that's News with the Eyes of Faith.